Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Everything Dodgeball podcast. I'm your host, Stefan Leitinger, and tonight I'm joined by Tamas Ward, player for the England Lions and the Bedford Rangers, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you for joining me. So first of all, Tamas, many people, especially in Europe, know who you are and know what you look like, but give the listeners a little introduction to you and what you've been up to in the world of dodgeball, basically.
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, I've been around for a long time. I first got into dodgeball, I want to say 2010 or 2011. I struggle to pick the exact date, but yeah, when I was 16 or 17, my teacher at school, my tutor, was actually the England Lions women's coach at the time, and got a lot of us. And you probably know the town of Reetham High School just purely from dodgeball, because there's a few of us who are still around and still playing. So yeah, I got into the Reetham Raiders team way back when, and very shortly, maybe a year later, I went to the England trials. So that was when I was 17 and actually got into the under-19 squad at that point. Went to my first Euros, which was in Sweden on an outdoor court, which is quite interesting. I didn't play that one. I was just there purely to support and to kind of be around the team, things like that. And then 1 year later, I actually played my first Euros in Italy, which was with the kind of plastic balls that were quite interesting. Again, we had to learn a different rule set for that particular Euros, completely different to what we were playing at 3-ball cloth at the time. So yeah, that was my first sort of introduction into international dodgeball. I then went to university from that point and played for what Arnie Noden, or Matthew Josiah, as most people probably know him these days. That was his university, the same university quite a lot of us went to. I went to that one and played for that team for my whole time, for about 4 years while I was at uni. And then pretty much straight after uni, we formed the Bedford Rangers, and I've been playing with those guys ever since. It's just a group of guys, all very good friends still, and we still play together now, which is good fun. Sort of took a bit of a hiatus in the middle there through England. I think I had a bit of a dodgeball burnout almost at one point. So didn't play a number of Euros and stuff because of that. And then kind of came back into the England sort of thing in Newcastle. Euros was my first sort of Euros back. That's when I sort of came back into properly training with the team. And yeah, I've been at every tournament since, really. So Euros and then Worlds most recently this summer, but not this Euros, which is obviously what we're probably going to be discussing later. But yeah, so that's a bit of a nutshell of me, but I've been playing for a long, long time, basically. Yeah.
Okay, absolutely awesome. Because I tried to do a little bit of background digging into your past, because I knew you were around for a long time, but because you resurfaced only in 2019 basically and started before I started, I basically didn't see you for a long time, and then it felt like you were on and off. I didn't know you played every single tournament since then. Did you go to the World Championships in 2018? No, obviously you started in 2019, so you weren't there.
Yes, exactly. So I mean, the one I did miss was the World Championships in Canada, but that was GB, so that was slightly different. So for the England guys, I played every time, but the GB I didn't play. Did play the Atlantic Cup when that was around.
Yeah.
I think you played in that as well, if I remember.
Yeah.
So I did play in that. I was playing foam at that point. So yeah, done a bit of everything for a long time, basically.
Okay, fair enough. So you played for the Atlantic Cup. You only played foam.
Yes.
You had
yeah,
two different teams.
We did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, didn't know that, or can't remember that. I only remember that I don't know if we drew against you in the foam game or something like that. Something where I think
Yeah, I don't think we lost. We didn't really win anything because we had a close game against Canada, lost very heavily to the US, and
Yeah,
I think you're right. We drew against you guys.
I think so. That's really. I think there was 20. What was it? 2017, 2016, 2017, something like
It was
that in
around then
Manchester,
because
right?
we had the Manchester World Cup in 2016. I did play in
Yeah.
that, but only came on I think well, I didn't have much game time in that tournament, but yeah, I was there.
Okay. So basically, you've been around since the beginning of dodgeball, so to say,
Mm.
and you said you had a little bit of a dodgeball burnout. Did you continue playing on a club level and just not on an international level?
Yeah, exactly. So I still played at university the whole time. I never had a break from that. I just didn't play sort of, I was still kind of training with England sort of now and again, but I wasn't really competing like kind of what I've been doing recently, where I've been really kind of training hard for it and stuff like that. I think, yeah, like I mentioned, I think it was a bit of a dodgeball burnout. I'd been playing for a load for a few years then, and I kind of just, I think I kind of lost interest at uni, unfortunately, but
Uh,
kind of regained my love for it towards the end there, basically.
Okay, so what got you back into it?
Oh, it's hard to say. I think it's probably watching. Um, well, so an interesting story is that during your time in New York when you were playing the world champs there, I was actually also in America. We were playing the Ultimate Dodgeball Championship, the UDC. I don't know if you saw that, but the
Yeah, I've
trampoline
seen
dodgeball.
pictures.
Yeah, so we were playing out there. We did okay, but we didn't get through into any kind of finals and stuff like that. So we actually got knocked out. So we had a couple of days at the end where we thought we were going to be playing, but we didn't end up playing. So we ended up spending quite a lot of time in just some pubs and bars and stuff in America. And in one of them, ESPN was on, and the Dodgeball World Championships was on TVs, which was pretty amazing. So we were
Really?
we were watching like, yeah, we were watching live. I can't remember what game it was we were watching, but I remember thinking then, I was like, yeah, I need to get back into this. It looks brilliant, you know.
Okay, awesome. Okay, that's a great story. Okay, I knew that it was sort of on ESPN, but since it wasn't I don't know if it was broadcasted on ESPN in Europe or if it was just Twitch or YouTube. So I never really saw any of that. And I just remembered that it cost a lot of money, and I don't know if anyone watched it, but apparently it got you back into dodgeball. So there
Yeah,
was something, and it was streamed in a pub, which is sort of one thing on a bucket list, being streamed in a pub. That is awesome.
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
one day all dodgeball will like you like that.
Yeah, that would be great. But I don't know if we're still around. Maybe in some sort of way, but if we're still playing, probably
Probably not.
not. All right. So jump from that. So 2019, you got back, then COVID happened, and then 2022, and then obviously 2023. So what was like your progression in the team? So you started in 2019, and now you're basically at the World Championships. You were obviously a starter in the finals as well. So what was the progression there?
Sure. So when I kind of got back in for Newcastle, I was definitely not a starter. I was kind of on the fringes there. We had a couple of players because I predominantly play, well, we call it position one, but on the right hand side. That's pretty much where I play, but there's quite a lot of competition at that point. So we had Ed Pickering, who, again, I'm not sure how many people you all remember, but Ed Pickering and then Matthew Josiah being the main competition there. So those guys were still very heavily rotated in that position. So I wasn't used really. I would come on now and again in different positions. They sort of tried me out in different positions, but my most effective was number one or on the right. And then moving into, I suppose it would have been Dracton would have been the next one. That was kind of, well, I wouldn't say a breakthrough, but I was playing really well, sort of club level. And then when it came to the actual and training with England, and then when it came to the tournament, it was quite clear that I was kind of definitely at that level and should be starting. And then throughout that tournament, I think I played pretty well, and it meant that I was kind of like more or less starting. And then when it came to 2023, and then Worlds most recently, I've definitely been pretty much starting, if not coming in and being very important within that team. So yeah, it's kind of been a bit of progression, but pretty happy with how things feel at the moment.
Okay. So, and when did you start playing men's and mixed as well?
Um, ooh, um, well, I played in Dracton. I also played. Oh no, Newcastle. Yeah, so Newcastle, I was in both squads.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember now, but yeah, I definitely played both. But I think I was rotation for both squads really.
Okay. Okay. So how is the the rotation for mixed and men's picked in England? Is how does that work basically?
Sure. So there's no, well, it's kind of changed over the years. We used to have, I'm trying to think back to 2016 World Champs. We had two separate squads. So we'd have a mixed squad and a men's squad, and there was no overlap at all. These days, so since Newcastle onwards, and to be honest, probably before, because I wasn't at those Euros, I can't remember. But now it's one squad, one large squad of 12, 13, 14 guys who now flip across the two disciplines. So yeah, now it's just one group.
Okay, but you can't put all of them in the mixed squad as well. So you have only 14
No,
spots in the mixed team. So
yeah,
how do you choose,
yeah.
or
So
how
so
is it
that
chosen who gets there?
generally, sort of the guys. Well, yeah. So the guys who are kind of like the stronger players individually, because we've got some really good squad players and team players. When you're playing in the men's, it's they're invaluable. But then you've got the kind of more individual. So, for example, if you've got a very good throw, or if you're a specifically good dodger, catcher, that kind of thing, that's generally when you'll be picked for mixed, because it's a bit more individualistic, as I'm sure you can agree on. We end up kind of picking the men who can do it themselves, like just themselves, rather than having to kind of work with the team around them. I think it's still important, obviously, to be a team player in mixed, but it's just a different dynamic, and you kind of need to be a little bit more selfish with your life on court, as well as obviously being as aggressive and as effective. Um, yeah, whilst you're playing. So
Okay. No, that's interesting. Yeah, I think I would mostly agree with that. And so, do you find yourself liking the men's or the mixed competition more? Is there a difference for you, or do you have sort of a favorite?
to be honest, they're both great. They're both great for different reasons. I mean, I love the men's squads just because I think it's easier to create that kind of real like squad bond and real team bond with the men's. I think because you spend a lot more time together. Like the trainings are longer together, and we all know each other better because we play each other at leagues and things like that more often than not. Mixed, because it's kind of combining two squads. I think it's harder to kind of have that real cohesion that I think the men's and the women's do separately. But then again, it's a really interesting atmosphere. I think that the mixed I really like because I don't know. For me, again, I'm not an individual player specifically. I love playing as a team, but I do a lot just myself, and I think mixed allows you really to shine doing that. Whereas the men's obviously is so much more faster paced, and I think you can get for example, you can spend 10 seconds on court in men's but be quite effective, whereas with mixed you have to really last the full game if you want to be effective. So it's an interesting dynamic. I can't say I've got a favourite, because I like both. I think for me with like Worlds, for example, I was devastated after we lost that game against the US. It was a real heart wrenching moment for me, and the only thing that kind of brought me back was the mixed. So I've got a real love for mixed as well as I do men's. But yeah, there's definitely something inside me that really wants to win a men's medal because it's been a little while since us England guys have managed to do that. So it'd be nice to get to that point.
Okay. Yeah, completely agree. So, yeah, I mean, you've touched on a few points there, and I think, as you said, like the life of an individual player in the mixed is quite different in value than to the men's, where you're just one of six, and also like your throwing power and your presence on the field makes a huge difference. And but I also feel like for me it's a little bit the other way around, where I think it's much harder in the mixed game to really play as a team, and I really like the mixed game because it's so much tougher to really find that cohesion and really find that team play. And I find if you just try to do it yourself, you can, and you have more opportunities to do so. And sometimes, like it really, those turnaround round moments and stuff like that, you can have them easier in the mixed game. But throughout the whole game, I feel it's so much more important to play as a team, because in the men's, if one of them jumps out of line and you do something stupid, it doesn't make that much of a difference. But in the mix, if you play too individualistically, if that's a word, then basically when you open yourself up, you also are a big detriment to your team if you get hit out because you didn't play as a team. So I think it's the
Completely agree.
combination of both of those sides and aspects which I find is really, so I probably play it mixed. I like to play mixed more, at least at the international stage, and but I really want to win men's more, which is a little bit weird. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I feel like men's is, as a individual, it's much harder to play it, and it's much rougher and faster, and so the competition is much higher. But on the mixed, you can make much more of an impact, but you can also make much more as a unit. And so I really
Yeah.
enjoy the process. And yeah, I wouldn't say I have a favorite, but probably like that. But yeah, that's quite interesting. So, and also like the picking the different teams is always interesting to me, how different federations do it, because I don't think anyone has really figured it out, and everyone is jumping between double playing, making two separate teams, because as you said, it's quite tough to make a cohesive team if you just put your best men and women together, and then the feeling in the squad is also something that I think really matters. So on that point, how did you feel like in the last two competitions, like Euros in Croatia and World Championships? How did you feel the team felt as a unit and the way they played?
Sure. Well, I think they were both quite different. Most recently, the Worlds was, I think, came with its own challenges. It was obviously the longest tournament any of us have played, which was, I think, a good thing. It was one of the best sort of tournament layouts that I've ever experienced. But it definitely made a difference with our, especially with the crossover between the guys. And so I'm sure the girls felt the same thing. But I just kind of noticed it more with the guys, I think. But where, for example, the guys we did select for mixed, we had a fair amount of injuries, or just sort of little things that they meant they weren't quite as fit as normal. Meaning that the gameplay we'd love to share and to kind of manage throughout the tournament wasn't really as effective as it normally would be. So by the end of the tournament, we had quite a few of us who had played a lot of games in a very testing atmosphere in that hall in Austria, and it kind of meant that I don't think we were quite at the peak. I don't, no excuses, I'll chuck them in early, but um, with Croatia, however, I think we did it pretty well. I think our rotation was really strong, um, and it kind of felt a bit easier. We kind of knew what our roles were, and we were able to do that rotation. So it was a little bit better, I think, anyway, in Croatia in terms of how that felt. Um, and yeah, and I think with Worlds as well, because we just lost that US game. Some of the lads are definitely, well, including myself, were pretty down about it. And the women, we just had the same thing with Northern Ireland. So it was a little bit strange playing that final. It was definitely something we were like, yeah, we want to redeem ourselves and want to do really well. But at the back of our minds, with just kind of the back of two pretty nasty defeats that we weren't expecting, and it's
Yeah.
kind of messed with the game plan really. So yeah, two different times really. So, but yeah, I'd say Worlds was challenging. I think we did really well to come into the final. To be honest, I think we did really well to get there, and pushed you guys all the way. It was quite a game at the end there. One of my favourite games I think I've played in a while. And then with the one in Croatia, I didn't actually play the final, so I was kind of watching it
Yeah,
tensely
true.
from the sidelines. So yeah, definitely something I kind of wish I kind of got more involved with that in. But obviously, I was there the whole way along, and I think two slightly different tournaments. But yeah, I think Wales was the one where we as a collective struggled more. I think.
Okay. So was there anyone because I know Steve like had an injury with his thumb or something, and he came on for I think
Yeah.
it's set or two, but basically couldn't hold the ball and do much. So that's obviously a big loss because he had a great tournament in Croatia, especially. who else on the rotation was really injured or out from the mixed?
Sure. So we had Dan Evans, who I'm not sure how much you saw throughout that tournament, but he's again generally a right hand side player. So would normally rotate for me or for Arnie, for Matthew Josiah. So and he's got one of the strongest arms that we have in the side. So he was a big loss, especially with rotation. Then we had Alex Harrison, who again middle player, kind of was going in and out throughout the tournament, but definitely wasn't himself. Um, we had Finn as well, Finley
Yeah.
Brindle Craven. So he was okay, but I think he was one of the ones, a bit like with me and Brett, where we'd played a lot of games, so you could really tell with us three that there was a little bit of fatigue setting in, definitely towards the latter end of the tournament anyway.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, so let's get a little bit into that final if you want to. So obviously, I have spoken to Brad a little bit about it, but obviously you played most of the game opposite of me, and you always do basically. So
Yeah.
how was that final for you? I've watched a little bit of it back recently, and it's quite fun the way you remember it. And I've watched it a few times since. And then always once you watch it, you see there are so many things that you didn't remember at all that way. So have you watched it recently, and what are your thoughts half a year later?
I haven't watched it too recently. I'll be perfectly honest. It probably was after I'd calmed down after the tournament, maybe a week later, once I'd kind of soaked my tears away. But no, I think it was an amazing final to be part of. It's kind of what if we're talking about when I was getting back into dodgeball 14 years ago, whatever it was, is what we imagined, an international final would look like. So you have the tunnel, you had that one court in the middle of everyone watching. Amazing. And one of the sort of best feelings, like to sort of walk out with the entrance music and everything. It was brilliant. It really hyped it up, and I loved it. Honestly, it was so great. But the actual game itself was a bit interesting because again we were kind of figuring out what our best lineup would work out to be, and it ended up where I was in the middle,
Yep.
which I'm quite a bigger guy, so generally I'm going to be targeted quite early on, regardless of who we play, which we kind of got that would be the case. And yeah, I knew that was going to be the case. So I knew I was going to be targeted straight away. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to do my best to get out of the way as quickly as possible or catch it. And that's what I was trying to do for the first couple of games. I did make a couple of catches. I think I managed to catch you once,
Yep.
but then I stood on the back line, and then I caught again, and then I stood on the back line. So it was a tough start, at least for the game. But it was interesting because, yeah, like I say, I was generally doing okay, I think, apart from standing on the lines. So once I was staying in court, I was doing all right. Um, but yeah, then if for example Arnie then got out, it would be my job to move over onto the right hand side. So again, definitely opposite you, which is never an easy task on the best of days. So it was good fun, but yeah, like I say, it was a great game to play because it was so back and forth. I think you guys pretty much had the upper hand most of the time. I'm going to try and remember what the scores were the whole way along, but I think we were basically chasing most of the game. And in the second half, we definitely had a better sort of a go at it, and we were starting to bring things back. And it kind of came around to that one swing set, where again, it's something that my friends like to remind me of a lot, that I got caught right at the end there in a crucial point, which yeah, I always point out it was a pretty good throw. I think it was a pretty good area. It was just a very, very good catch. So, these things happen in dodgeball, and I don't mind if it's a catch like that swung it and won the game for you guys. I think it was justified. So I don't mind losing for that kind of reason, rather than anything else. So yeah, great final. Loved every minute of it. Obviously, going to be heartbreaking at the end there because we kind of, we went into that world tournament wanting to win lots, and we ended up not coming with anything really apart from a silver medal in mix, which was obviously still a great achievement. Really loved it, but yeah, wanted a little bit more. But yeah, how did you find the final?
Yeah, I think it was pretty much the same way. It was a tough final. I loved every minute of it. As you said, the whole atmosphere, obviously being in our home nation as well, was the cherry on top. And like the court with all the spectators, watched it back a few times, obviously, to be honest. And every 2 months or so, I watch at least a little bit of it to get myself ready to play dodgeball again, because it's like something that really gets me motivated to get back into it, and it's getting tougher and tougher to find that motivation, and that really helps. But I think like the one thing that really stood out that I never ever expected, or never before had that feeling of an atmosphere in a whole hall or event like this before. So basically always the final was like the players standing around. It was only one court, but it was just one court like before, and there was just players around the net, and there was a little bit of an atmosphere. Player were watching, player were cheering, but it never felt this intense. This really felt like a stadium atmosphere where you really could feel the whole stadium behind you or against you in this case. But I think that is something that everyone in sports really is looking forward, and that is something everyone I think really enjoys, and that was just amazing. So that's something I really like to get back to, and I hope in the future will be more like this at every event, basically like Euros, Worlds, wherever you go. So I think from that point it was obviously amazing. The outcome obviously was quite fine for us as well. And it feels really weird to be talking. I've been talking to Nate and everyone I've played against, and it's like a really weird feeling when I sort of interview you or talk to you, and you have to like relay or relive that whole moment that was obviously kind of painful, even though it's a winning silver is an amazing achievement, but obviously you wanted more. So it's fun. It was awesome. It was great. Yeah. There's not really a bad side to it, just that it feels a little bit awkward talking about it like that to you.
No,
But
that's yeah, that's sport though, isn't it? Like, so you win some and you lose. I mean, I've been talking to a lot of people, um, sort of about the whole England situation at the moment. So, because it's, not necessarily the nicest situation to be in. It's been a little while of not kind of achieving what we would like to achieve. So it's taken a little time, but England have been that team that everyone wants to beat for so long. And we've kind of been riding this wave of winning everything. And with a lot of the teams like you guys in Northern Ireland, these teams that are like, well, overtaking us now, but we're coming up, had that kind of struggle of being beaten quite a lot, and then coming through it and now winning. England are on the opposite trajectory, but hopefully now on the way back up again. So it's sport. Teams win for a long time, and then the kind of dynasty ends, and then eventually, hopefully, we can kind of bring it back. But yeah, like I'm obviously devastated at the moment, and don't get me wrong, talking about it is a little bit painful. But I've played sport my whole life, so it's one of those ones where it's disappointing at the time, and we want to get back and winning, and that's our main goal now. But yeah, I don't mind bathing in your in your glory at the moment. That's absolutely
all right, that's nice to hear. That's nice to hear. So we'll bathe in it a little bit together now.
fine.
So but on that point, so I think the trajectory and like as you said, England was always winning and never started from that point where they got beaten ever before, and then they got beaten a little bit, but still everyone felt like okay, they're still basically invincible, and Northern Ireland can beat them in the men's, and Austria can beat them in the mixed. But obviously, it sort of managed or went the way that you obviously didn't win anything for quite a long time, especially for England standards. So you've always been in the top 3 or 4, but that's obviously not what you're going for. And so basically, you're in a weird position where you're still sort of the favorites in almost every game. Even in those games, you sort of seem like the favorite just from habit, just from knowing you have the strongest lead, you have the biggest depth in your squad and stuff. So everyone is expecting England before every tournament. So you, even though you didn't win the last few, you still sort of have the pressure of being the champion, and everyone expects you to win, and everyone is sort of putting the pressure on you and is happy if the other team wins. So being in that situation, how does that feel? How do you feel the pressure is in the squad and in the whole team and organization at the moment and throughout the last 2 or 3 years?
It's definitely there. I mean, it's funny because we've had a bit of a cycle recently, especially since, well, probably since Newcastle, where we've had the defeat and sort of gone back, look what we did, what can we improve on? Um, let's change things. Let's make sure for the next tournament we're ready for, whoever we might be facing, whether it's Northern Ireland, you guys, or whichever team it is at that moment. Um, and we feel like we're making those changes throughout training and through working really hard individually. I mean, I'm sure most nations are the same, but we put a lot of emphasis on off court training. So in the gym and obviously training with your own clubs and things like that. We're trying to make sure that we're kind of peak physical condition, and then we put the work in to try and kind of work on our tactics and things like that. So when the next tournament comes around, we feel ready. So we come up to lead up with the tournament feeling really confident, super confident, because it's starting to feel good. The team's starting to feel together. We're feeling good physically, and we're getting into a really confident state. And then, unfortunately, well, at least the last few years, we've done that exact process, and then we've got to the tournament again, doing pretty well throughout groups and knockout stages. And it kind of comes to those crunch games, and we just haven't managed to push it over the line yet. So it's really it's difficult, really, because not what I don't think any of us have been able to go. Do you know what? That's what we did wrong. That's the thing that was the issue between winning and not winning. I think what we find is that because the team is so strong in terms of the depth, we should be able to play most teams and not have to play our best. And we should be able to, because we're collectively so strong, we should be able to come out on top. I think the difference comes where we play a team that's probably got the better six on court or the better sort of team cohesion on court. That's when it kind of unravels a little bit. And it's not an easy thing to fix, really. So there's a lot of pressure on the coaches and trying to make sure that we've got the best sort of preparation and lead up to tournaments, because the pressure isn't easy, because England, every time we step on court, there's been controversy over the years in terms of how England perceived and kind of how we play and kind of how we want to kind of push the game forward. So it's kind of led to, I mean, I'm sure you've played against England many times where the crowd is almost exclusively not cheering for England. So it's not easy, when you're on court and you're hearing everything you do either booed or the opposite, where everything goes against you is cheered. It's an interesting one. But then again, I mean, I don't know how other people feel specifically on court, but I'm one of those who's I'm really struggling to own. I'm only really focusing on the other team. Really, I'm really like kind of that's where my brain is. That's where my concentration is. So it doesn't really affect me too desperately. But as soon as I'm out, for example, let's say I've been hit and I go out, that's when I can feel it. That's when you really feel it, and then you have to try and step back on court after. And yeah, it's a tough one, but yeah, it's an interesting one as an England player. I think we're becoming, ironically, sort of underdogs for the last few years, and it sounds a bit strange saying that considering the history of England, but I think eventually maybe it'll turn around where we're not always, the team that everyone wants to be and everyone wants to hate, hopefully one time, who knows, but I'm sure we'll talk about it later, which I haven't helped there, so we'll see.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get a little bit into that. Like at the tournament, like World Championships or Euros, how do you enjoy the tournament experience as a whole? So like apart from the playing side, which is obviously playing for England until the semi-final or final, it's really fun, but like the whole community thing, how do you perceive that as an English player?
Um, I love it personally. I love the whole tournament atmosphere. Don't get me wrong. Playing for England means that I don't know. we're not always automatically, liked and stuff like that. And historically, we've kind of gone for this more segregated, we'll stay in our own hotel rather than everyone else. And we've done that thing. I think that's becoming less of a kind of priority these days. So, hopefully we can sort of integrate a bit more with the with the other nations. But yeah, there's definitely a little bit of segregation, and that's probably mainly down to us. To be honest with you, I don't think it's anything that anyone else is doing wrong. But I love an international tournament. I absolutely think it's one of the most fun things that you can ever be involved in. And I think, to be honest, however you compete in that tournament is absolutely fine. So however you want to do it, really, and if you want to be really totally invested in the whole kind of dodgeball, well, I always call it a cult, to be honest with you, because
It is.
it is a little bit like
Definitely is.
that. Yeah, only a few of us really know what it is and how important it is to just us. But the international dodgeball scene is like the pinnacle of that, and I love it. I personally love it. But yeah, I can see why England are kind of seen as that slight outsiders compared to the other nations, because the other nations just generally seem to be this very much tight knit community, and England are kind of in there, but sometimes not so much. So I personally love it. I love kind of getting involved, but I also love spending time just in the evening camp, like spending time around my teammates. I love it. I'm generally the club DJ and stuff, so I love my speaker, even though it's not quite, as the Austrians like
Yeah,
to
we'll
remind me,
have
not
to
quite
get
as
into
big.
that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not quite as big, so I understand that. It's not all about the size, but it's something I love to do and love to get involved in. I'm generally that kind of person, and I'm the same for my club team as well. So I'm always the person bringing the speaker and kind of really trying to create that atmosphere. So yeah, no, I love it. To be honest, that's the summary, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay. That is really good to hear, because I think that's a really big part. As you said, it's a little cult, a little bubble that we live in, and basically the community and everything is such an important part of the whole thing. And if you don't have that, then what in the end do you have? Because no one outside of it really cares if you went to that volleyball game and won or lost. So as Brad said it, he just went to Worlds and just won silver. That's all everyone knows, and he's not talking about it any more than that. And I think that is a fun thing, but it's also really fun to have that community and have like that enjoyment of those international tournaments in specifically. So I'm happy that it's an enjoyable process as well, because from the outside, honestly, in the past, it didn't seem like it. At least I know we've mingled with a few guys and we've been around for a long time, so there's lots of crossover, and obviously it's been way different as the years progress, but it's still like England has that sort of segregated aura to it, basically. So when the England Lions enter the gym, it's like still something else. It feels different than anyone else, and you take it very serious. And I think that is really good, and we take it very serious as well. And it wasn't always like this, and I think that's a really important part of the game. And I think that's what brought the sport to the level that it's at right now, and where we have venues like this and competitions like this. So I think that part is absolutely important. But still, since it's such a bubble, I feel like the other part is also really important. And as you say, it transfers to the court as well a bit. So what do you feel like England did to do that, or to deserve it, or the way it's perceived, and will that change in the future? Do you think like there is a push for change, and especially if younger players come in, and also the situation is different where you're not the winner of everything, that makes it maybe a little bit easier as well in some regards?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a little bit of, it's definitely sort of England's in the past own making, really. I mean, they've been around since the start, and we've always attempted, at least, to take it super seriously and try and take it as if we are, again, because of dodgeball, we're not this super professional outfit, really. So we kind of from the start we tried to be, we're we had all sorts. We had a nutritionist back in the day. We've had, people who were looking at mobility, and we had physiotherapists, and all the stuff that pro sports have already very much in place. It's something that we tried to show, like, this is where dodgeball can go, and this is where we can take it. And I think that's kind of where the sport has definitely kind of got closer to. But because England kind of really wanted to do that really early on, and it kind of took away a little bit from the fun of dodgeball, which is, ultimately why we all play it. I think that's why there was some issues there, and it kind of meant that, it was all about the squad. We were just about winning. That's all we cared about, and we didn't really care about, like, being friends with the other nations and things like that. And I kind of get it. I do understand where the sort of stigmas come from and stuff like that. And there's also been, general controversy in terms of, like fair play and stuff we've had in the past, which, to be honest, is always going to happen with top teams, top players, and things like that. It's inevitable. I think it's a shame that, it kind of happened with England, and that meant that the stigma kind of got pushed further, and things like that. I do think we are looking to change things. I mean, we're definitely looking at this more kind of fun aspect of competing. We're very much super serious about still competing at the highest level. So we will, when we're on court at least, definitely be, hungry for winning. So that's definitely what we're still aiming towards. But I think off court, I think we're trying to be at least a little bit more approachable, a little bit more fun, definitely get involved a bit more on the community aspect and things like that. So I think, it won't be fixed overnight, things like that. But I do really think that it will get to a point where, well, either dodgeball moves on to a position where, unfortunately, we're not able to do that kind of tight knit cult that we have at the moment. It might get to that point where it's so professional that we kind of have to move back into the kind of segregation. But in the meantime, before that, hopefully happens, we'll kind of get back into the kind of what we, early days of Euros, where it was very much just all of us kind of having fun off court, but serious on court. That's what I hope it gets to, and I think we'll get there, but it'll just take some time.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. And do you think that is that an English thing, or where did that come from basically? So there are so many different nations, and obviously you have sort of that stigma to every nation. Everyone is like sort of a parody of their country. Like everyone knows if they come from Sweden, they're party animals, and if they come from Italy, they're gonna be really loud on court and everywhere else. And so there's sort of this image you have, and basically, at least from the outside, being obviously biased, and that's sort of the stigma that you really fulfilled to a certain extent, where it was in a way this professionalism, which is something that I perceive as quite an English thing, and then a good trait as well, but it was just in a weird place basically, where we were just there to have fun and party, and most of them were, and then there was England, who just dominated everyone anyways, and just had headphones for their coaches and their retrievers, and we were like, okay, what the fuck is going on? So it was, on the one hand, it was something to make fun of and like laugh about. On the other hand, we got dominated by that team, and that was also something like we looked up to England in certain aspects, and on the other hand, we had to put them down a little bit to make them, I don't know, more approachable or whatever, just have a little bit of fun. But I think that balance is really key in a situation where the sport is right at. So basically, in a few years, 10 years, maybe we go back to that segregation, but that is when we have a really stable community and a really, really structured organization stuff and everything. But at this point, England is the one who started it all, and it should be in England's biggest interest to grow the sport. And that, I think, is what every other nation tries to do with the connection, with the partying, with the connecting with other peoples, where you just try to help the community grow the same way you do it on a local level, where you, at league days, you're really fun with everyone and newcomers are really invited and stuff like that. So you're the same at the European or world level. And I think I've seen that now more with England, with the newer nations, especially, where you're much more open to newer nations and try to not live that old stigma and start them off on the wrong foot, basically. But it's really tough for you to connect with those nations that sort of have their biases and already have made up their mind who England is, and you have a lot of history with them probably, and you've probably done stuff to deserve some of the comments, and they have probably made a lot of rumors and judgments behind England's back. So there's basically like a little bit of a barrier in between, and it's probably quite hard to break through that. And so we can do that, and sometimes so I don't feel like that anymore, because we started really as a really weak team, so we were sort of welcomed, not really by England, but by the community, but still was around for so long that we got to know more players individually. And also we competed at that level that we also have that respect, and that we just know each other for such a long time, even though we obviously haven't spoken before this, probably more than a few words. So you also have this little bit of segregation going on, which is still kind of weird in my opinion. And I think that's, for the level and the stage the sport is at, really really important. So when we are now at the top, obviously, which is really fun, but I think it's really important for us to be the example and reach out to people and be really welcoming and show that being competitive and really competitive on the field, which I absolutely am, but really be friendly and welcoming and supportive outside of that 40 minutes basically. So I think it's a really good thing that you sort of transition to that without losing that competitive and also professional edge. I think that is something you really bring to the table, which is good for dodgeball, and which is something we make fun of, but we're also definitely jealous of, that you have your physio and your massage guy and staff, and we're just trying to do everything on our own and struggle ourselves. And it's, from the outside, it really seems so controlled and professional. So I think it's good to have both of that. And yeah, I've definitely seen that change in the past, and I've seen it pretty much also with the younger generation. But I still feel like there is a lingering thing between established nation. Would you agree with that assessment and rant?
Uh, I would actually, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think as we've spoken about the kind of historical sort of what we've had with England has been that exact thing, with a little bit of segregation, a little bit of sort of separation between trying to kind of put ourselves a bit on a different like pedestal, maybe. I don't know whether that's what we were trying to achieve, to kind of go like, yes, we're better, so let's do this. We know the best, we know the better way of doing things, and we'll just continue to do that. I think that's kind of what the historical, where it all started, really, because it was working. We were winning everything. It definitely meant that, why change something that isn't broken? We're going to these tournaments. Yes, it's obviously a little bit, maybe our priorities a bit different to other nations in terms of how much fun we're having whilst we're there, but we were there to win, and it was working. And I think sort of recently, because it hasn't been working, it's like we almost feel a little bit sour about it, and we're kind of like licking our wounds a little bit on the sidelines, and it's still just kind of England. So I see your point in terms of the lingering kind of atmosphere that there is still around. So there is definitely that. I do think it's kind of shifting slowly but surely. I think that because of the way or the nature of the game, obviously, without being kind of together with other nations, it's much harder to enjoy, especially in longer tournaments as well. So Worlds being the longest tournament is, well, I felt I was talking to a lot more nations, especially those who came from further away, like the Australian guys, the US guys. We were talking a lot with those, that weren't necessarily part of like the European, which we see each other every year more or less. So it's definitely getting there. Like, I think it's as I said before, it's not going to change straight away, and people's stigma will always be around, and the kind of rumors and things that people say. I understand it. Like, it's going to be a thing, and will be for a long time, because as we've been speaking about, we've been in the game for a long time, so it's not like it's not going to go away anytime soon. But like I said, hopefully we can just, when the tournaments are happening, we can do our side of things, keep on, trying to bridge those gaps a little bit, and eventually everyone will forget about, these kind of few years where if there has been a separation, um, that why it happened and things like that. So yeah, I think hopefully we'll get towards that point. I don't think it will ever be perfect ever. I think it's not the damage is done. I mean, you know what I'm saying, but it's one of those ones where I think it's almost too late to go like everyone's going to forget it tomorrow.
Yeah.
We'll just keep working on it. Really, I think that's the
Yeah,
thing.
and I think that's completely fair where it doesn't have to change overnight, and I think it doesn't ever have to, no one has to have the same um take on the game and the same approach. And I think other nations like Sweden, for example, really changed their approach as well, where, or us definitely as well, where it was in the beginning all about partying and the social side. And then we thought winning is also fun. So combining those two is probably at the moment like the balance where it really lies. And so I think that effort is definitely received. And also it's good to get new nations in and find people who don't have that baggage with you. So do you feel like, because I've talked to Josh before on the topic of fair play and stuff, and I sort of had the argument that because England is such a big community and such a tough league and such a challenging environment and such a competitive environment, that it's much harder probably in that environment to have that friendly and social character as well, and also in regarding fair play. So for us, the community is Northern Ireland, and us like nations that are really small and where the programs are really condensed in one area, and we're basically all friends in a way. So you don't get that animosity and not that separation because it wouldn't work on a regional base. And so we just take this to the international stage as well. But in England, it's quite different. I suppose from the outside, where it's very competitive to get in that squad of 12 or 14 players, get in that mix spot, getting that into that starting lineup, where like it starts much sooner than on the field. So you have to be more professional and prepared. How is it on league days and stuff like that? Do you feel it's the environment is pretty much the same in England?
I think it's similar. It's there's definitely more of a community throughout sort of maybe sort of lower leagues and teams that have um, multiple teams within that span across different leagues as well, especially because you'll see each other, once a week, if not once every other week, and there's definitely that kind of community feel. League days, so for example, Super League days is the days that I'm most familiar with. It's still a bit sort of team segregation, still definitely a thing. So, for example, I spend most of my time with the Bedford Rangers. Um, Obviously, then quite frequently talking to the other guys from England most of the day as well. So, yeah, there's kind of like different like cliques almost, to put it that way, that do happen on league days. Us, the Bedford Rangers, are quite known for being the sort of louder ones. Again, I've got my speaker, so I'm generally the guy who's blasting music all day and pretty annoying everyone. But so that's kind of what we're because we're a group of mates from uni. We're quite close, so we just laugh and joke around all day, and then try and turn it on at least when we step on court. So it's quite funny coming personally for me anyway, going from the England setup, which there's that kind of slight other side of things in terms of stigma of being super professional, and everyone perceives us as that. And then when I'm playing league, it's almost the exact opposite. We're seen as the kind of jokers, the kind of people who are loud and boisterous and slightly annoying. So it's one of those interesting dynamics. But yeah, it's yeah, I think because there is so many people playing, and there's people who have come from university, playing in university leagues, and then going into the national leagues. There's a huge setup really now. I think it will probably become more kind of closer knit because, well, when I was playing university, it wasn't what's called a bucks sport, which is funded basically. So it wasn't funded when I was playing at uni. So we'd, pay for our own travel and all that kind of stuff. Whereas now, it's funded by university. So they've got a lot more opportunity now to create the proper leagues, have good amount of players playing without having to worry about too much about the financial side of things. Um, and so then those guys will feed, which they are already really feeding into the main clubs. So I think kind of then it will just be, well, in a few years' time, it'll probably be just those players that are playing. So it'll probably be pretty tight knit by that point. Um, but yeah, it's an interesting setup in the UK. I mean, we can tell like whenever we play against Northern Ireland or you guys, we can tell it's very much you guys know each other really, really well. Whereas most of the time when we play as an England team, you've got competing sort of styles of play. Sort of we're generally playing against each other at the highest standard. And yeah, so there's some definite segregation there, but at the same time, there's sort of differences in between each team, like whether you're kind of going in for more fun or whether you're really going for it as a competition and things like that. So yeah, there's the kind of almost the same that we find at Euros and World Championships. We have the same but smaller in the UK.
Yeah. Okay. So how often have you been kicked out for your speaker? Because we don't have a really good track record in the UK with our speaker.
I get told to turn it off a lot,
Okay.
almost every league meet. But I
And
don't
when you
get
get told,
kicked out too often, which is
okay, that is
good.
good because you're much bigger than Max. So basically, we need a bigger guy at the boombox or a smaller boombox so that the guy looks bigger. But okay, that's fair because when someone tells you to turn it off, what do you do?
I turn it down for a little bit and then probably turn it back up again after.
Okay. And what's the time space in between those two actions? Asking for a friend.
um, I normally wait till half time or something like that. When the
Okay.
teams change around ends, and then one team probably isn't as annoyed as the other one was.
Okay, so that's the difference I think between English people and Austrian people. So Max, if you tell him to shut it down, and even if we tell him, he turns it down and turns it 2 seconds. I think 2 seconds is like his biggest discipline, and then he turns it up louder. It's just built into him. It's caused for a lot of problems, but also a lot of good times. So I would never change that. Okay, so um, I'd like to get into the fair play topic now, and I would start from a more general point of view. As we said now, like England and the whole league system and stuff is like a much bigger setup and a much more competitive scene as well. Like in Austria, we have basically 2 or 3 teams that are competing for the win, and it's basically maybe 2 teams that are really going for the win, and everyone is so close together that it's just really competitive on the field, but we're all friends. So off the field it's really close between those 2, 3, 4 teams. But in England I suppose it's quite different. So I was talking to Josh about fair play in Northern Ireland, where basically they were the ones who put that standard to the level that I think it is today, and they were sort of the role models early on for fair play. And for us in Austria, that made really an impact because in the beginning we came from a handball background of different sports where fair play isn't that important and not that I don't know, put towards your players. So fair play is just something you've heard of. And so in the beginning, it wasn't something we came to naturally, and it was something we just had to adapt to and learn. And sort of the league and the whole system, because we're such a tiny nation and play against each other every weekend, it was something that sort of got educated out of us on its own, because otherwise it was not sustainable. If you were known as a cheater from your 10th friends you're playing against, that's not a nice thing to do. And sort of it, obviously throughout the years it just got trained out of people, and then we really emphasized it for the newer players who came in, because at that point we knew how important it was for the game, but it wasn't something that we inherently had in ourselves. So for me especially, it's something that I really had to teach myself. So how do you feel like fair play? What's the standpoint of fair play for the sport in your opinion? And how do you feel it is in England and compared to maybe Northern Ireland or international standards?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty well. It's very important for the sport moving forward. It's one of those. It's an interesting one because I think if you look across the majority of sports, as you mentioned before, it's not really a thing. I think because of the nature of the game, because of how fast paced it is, and how difficult it is to referee, fair play does it needs to be a thing because otherwise it becomes it's very difficult to manage. I think kind of what we want the sport to go towards is if we can have some kind of hotspot or things like that, or it'd be quite interesting to see if we can get something towards that line. But realistically, it does have to kind of come down to the players. I think historically with England there hasn't been the best reception of that, and probably I've unfortunately the most recent time probably the spearhead of that, which is a real shame. It's something that I think that it was kind of when we spoke about it, it was like we were competing at the highest level. We want to be, on the edge. If you're not sure, then we just, make sure the refs will tell you, and then go. I think that it is so good to see, and so good to play teams that are super, honest about things, and it makes the game just much more enjoyable to play. So, like, in terms of the sport itself and what we all love doing and what we love playing, it's definitely something that is very high on the agenda. I think even we say that England is as in like the leagues within England are obviously there's a lot more teams and probably more competitive just because there's physically more people playing the game. It's still a thing, definitely. Obviously, we still have to rely on refs in certain situations, which is why we have them. We obviously have gone from having, I'm trying to remember how it used to go back in the day, but having one ref into two, into six now. So it's obviously a lot easier, or a lot more manageable than it used to be, at least. But it's still down to the players to ensure that everyone's having a enjoyable and fair time of playing. So it's an interesting one. Like I said, I don't think it's perceived well in England. I don't think I was in the England setup a lot when there was a lot of that sort of stigma going around, and then kind of later on when I've kind of joined, I've seen it sort of firsthand what's happening and stuff like that, and then obviously most recently being involved in one myself. So I kind of get the stigma behind it. I understand obviously generally when we're talking about the sport and what we want to do with it, we want to move it further forward as possible. So anything we can do to make it the most competitive, the most enjoyable for everyone, and the best to watch, the better. So yeah.
Okay. And how do you perceive, is there like in the English league or in the Super League where you play, is cheating an issue? Is cheating an issue, and also is like the bad mouthing or stuff that people think that people cheat, sort of, if you get what I mean. So cheating is the one thing, but also like people accusing people of cheating is the other side to the thing. And I think the more cheating there is, the more of the accusations are there as well, and the more toxic the whole environment and atmosphere gets, and the more people are incentivized to cheat again. So sort of it's a downward spiral, and it's really hard to break out from that if there is no a really good incentive to do so. So how do you feel it is at the moment, and how do you feel, or how is it in England? Is that a topic at the national program where cheating, and now you have youth teams as well? Do you feel like it's a topic, or is it just something that's on the sidelines?
Sure. The national level definitely it's been spoken about a lot, especially in recent years, about making sure that fair play is like the top of our sort of agenda. So all players have like little player contracts that we sign towards at the start of our, when we sort of sign on for that season. It's within our contracts there, and then obviously emphasised throughout our training sessions and stuff, and obviously it's looked at our leagues. So at national level, it's definitely a priority. Believe it or not, it's hard to say whether other nations perceive that as being the case or not. I'm not sure, but that is definitely what we're going towards. The English leagues and stuff like that, it depends on how competitive the game becomes. I think that sometimes you do have the odd game now and again where, I don't know, maybe there's a stigma between a certain player or a certain team, and then as you play the game, it inevitably leads to people assuming that that person has either cheated or that team is cheating. And so there can be some like that. There definitely can be. I don't see it as much these days. I think it's kind of coming out of the English leagues. Definitely, it's not something that, well, I personally haven't gone like that team is cheating or that person is always cheating. I haven't personally seen that or noticed that, and I don't really see my friends and people I play with. I haven't noticed them think the same thing. So I think it's definitely, well, I don't think it was ever bad in the UK, but it definitely is better these days.
Yep. Good, because it's, as you said, it's a really tough conversation, especially coming from other sports and like the incentives. And I've spoken to lots of different people and lots of English players as well about the topic, and there are very different opinions about fair play. Like the Northern Irish opinion is pretty, I would say, cohesive, and it's pretty like from the top instilled in new players and the new generation as well. Where obviously there's always going to be some sort of cheating, but like I talked to Chio for a podcast, and he plays on a really recreational level in Northern Ireland, and he said the first thing when he came to training was he got hit at his trousers, and he was like, okay, that no one saw that. And Josh from the outside said, Gio, step out, we heard that. And he was like, what the fuck, how did he hear that? And once you really instill that from the top down and see it from other players, and really see that it's a lot of respect to your opponents and your players as well, that it's such an important point. It's really hard to, if you're stigmatized once, and we have had those players as well in Austria, it's really hard to get that image away from you, because in dodgeball there is always going to be that moment where you don't know, did it hit him, did it block, did it bounce first, whatever it was. So those situations will always arise, and if you don't have the confidence and the belief in the other player that they will act in their best, to their best standard, then it's really bad for the game. And it's really bad for the game, because it starts this spiral where you think he cheated and he thinks you think he cheated, and the accusations start, and then the refs think they have to step in and call people out for something they thought was a hit. And I think that is like the point where it really destroys the game. Once the ref feels the need to say a player is out because he thought it was a block that hit him or not, then the game is done. I think refs are there to like see if it was a hit that he didn't see, or if it was something obvious. But if it was a thing that touched him, even if he hears something, and sometimes you hear a hit, but whether it was the finger or the ball or the the shoe, no one really knows in many situations. And I think that is the most important thing in dodgeball, that you can trust in your opponent to be fair to the best extent that they can, and that they can feel it as well. So yeah, and but I've talked to a few players from England from different levels as well, and some players really have the standpoint that they say, if the ref calls me out, then I'm out, and if not, I'm not out. And they don't understand why that isn't the case, because in other sports it works that way, and I get that point. Like from a competitive standpoint, I totally get that argument. But the thing is, it doesn't work in dodgeball. And once we start down that road, then we're doomed, and the game is just fucked until we get VR or some sort of motion sensor stuff. And we are not there yet by a long shot. So I think until that point, it's in everyone's interest to get that as far out of the sport as is humanly possible. And there will be instances where it's really close and maybe people can't tell, but those instances will even themselves out, and those are not the ones that really make a difference. But the other instances really make difference, and makes a lot of stigma and makes a lot of bad blood. And I think that's a good thing in the community. That's where the tight knitness of the community is something that helps, because it's so close that it's really hard to get away with it at this point. And again, I don't know, I'm always talking too much on this topics, but to get your own opinion, what would you say is like a good way to treat the topic, to instill it in players that they get how important it is? And how would you like punish stuff like that, as you have been punished? Like, what would you think is a good way to get rid of it, basically?
Sure. Well, to be honest with you, a little bit like what's happened to me is probably not a bad way of going around it. Um, I think that it's sort of after the fact, um, disciplinary kind of stuff is probably what's needed to start with. Obviously, we don't want that as something we have to do after every tournament. Really, that's hopefully we don't want to get to that stage where it's constantly, I don't know, posting videos of this player, that player, to try and get them banned or something like that. That's not obviously what we want to happen, because then it could become a tool in the competition in itself. But I think that an example was made um, of me in that respect, and I think that's probably the best sort of start, at least, to kind of make sure that that's what happens to begin with. Obviously, it does start with sort of habits and stuff like that, and that's from very beginning when you're starting to play and kind of going on from there. And even if you've been playing for a long time, just making sure you train like that, you play like that, and so every instance of the game, so there's never any position where you're second guessing and things like that. I think that's the easiest way to kind of start it. But yeah, it's hard to say, like, in terms of like on the day, if it's obvious, then the card system, I think, is probably the best way of negotiating that, depending on the seriousness, things like that. Obviously, we never want the refs to get involved if they have to, but um, if needs be, if that's what we need to do, it'll obviously be a deterrent. So for anyone in that particular situation, I think after the fact, like I said, if it's really bad, a bit like what happened to me, I think it is justified to have a look at bans and stuff like that. I mean, personally, for me, it's a bit embarrassing for me, that whole situation, and maybe we'll talk about it a bit more in a bit, but um, it's something that I'm embarrassed that happened, and I kind of accept the punishment because of that. So I kind of appreciate that's what's kind of happened. And I think sometimes I'm like, oh, was it harsh? Should it be more onus on the refs? As players, should we be, in judge, like, should we judge whether we are out or something? Is that on us? Is that something we need to concentrate as well as playing the game? I kind of question myself a little bit, and I have done over the last couple of years, sort of since everything sort of happened. So but then again, as you've mentioned, in terms of, we don't want the refs to have to intervene every 5 seconds. That's not what we want. It ruins the game. It slows it down and completely changes it. And then, as you mentioned as well, it kind of takes the fun away from, and takes away the competitiveness as well. So, if you have made that amazing glancing toe shot, or, things like that, that may not always be seen by the refs, but you and the player who was hit know, then obviously, and then that player stays in, it kind of ruins that, So I completely agree with you. That's the last thing we want. But yeah, so I think to stop it, it's, at the start, you're training, you're playing, every moment when you're stepping on a court should be instilled within you. And then, if, we don't want that to happen, but if it does, then making sure card systems are employed if we do need to use them. And then obviously, if we do need to use bans and things like that after the fact, after a game is finished, depending on the seriousness and stuff, I kind of get that as well. I mean, hopefully it doesn't come to that point for anyone else, but yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think it's awesome. I really appreciate that you're open to talking about it. I know it's not an easy thing to talk about, and obviously it's, as you said, a bit embarrassing, but also really something that really hurts. And in that community, it's much harder because it's so closely knit, and the stigma that is involved. So I really think it's a testament to your character, and I really appreciate that you are willing to talk about it. And I think that is also a really important way to step forward from this. So to see it as a learning experience, I would also say it's like made an example. You've been made a bit of an example. And I personally totally agree with the charge, because it's drastic and it's weird and it's harsh for a sport like ours, where everyone pays for it themselves, and there are no real world consequences, and the only thing is that you really are not allowed to pay a lot of euros to go somewhere and spend a week in some sort of gym. So we're saving you a lot of stuff. But I think that's the thing that hurts a dodgeball player most. And that's a thing that really shows to the community that we have to be rigid about that. And obviously it sucks and it's harsh. And I think it's really good the way you talk about it now shows that you've thought about it and really try to learn and grow your character from that. And I think that is really important. And I think we've all been there. I don't think any of us started like a clean sheet, and we've all got our struggles still. So it's not like everyone is like an angel and has never been um, thought like, "Ooh, no one saw that," and it's kind of important. So I think that is something, at least I personally still really have to fight myself for, and it's something the thing that really helps me is that I know now there are lots of people that look at me, and if I do a little mistakes, they're gonna point that out to me, and I'm at the sort of a pedestal. If I do something wrong, I'm gonna hear from it, and that's something that really helps me. That sort of pressure, and I also know the cameras are really good, but I really try to do it the same thing in training when I play against a 16-year-old kid and he just hits me slightly and my ego is like, fuck, I can't lose this 1v1 versus a 16-year-old. And that's also a battle you have to always fight, and it's not something that is easy. So I think it's really human to point that out, that it's not something where like someone's a cheater and someone is a good guy. So everyone who has that competitive spirit in themselves has to fight it. And so I think it's really important as a community to applaud that and be really welcoming back. If you make mistakes, you've done shit, many people have, and that's no excuse, but there's a way to come back from that with your head held high. And I think if we really grow from those situations as a community, then it's something really great. And that is something that the strength of the whole community really is shown as well, where you can say, okay, stuff happened, and we know it's been a struggle for you in the past or for someone else, but you've learned from that. So I think the Northern Irish system is something. I don't know if you've listened to that podcast where Josh talks like the 3 steps of fair play, where the first step is you as a player, where you really everything you feel, everything you know, you act on it. Even though no one saw it, even though you don't get any points for it, if you're sure about it, step out immediately. If you're not sure, then the next instance is your team as well, to help your players, and especially help players who are maybe don't have an easy time with it as well. So if you step on the line, if you see that he blocked himself on the foot or something like that, it is on you as a team as well to put your teammate out. And that is something that I think is really good for the sport of dodgeball, and is really something that is so different to any other sport, because you can't do that in another sport because it would be stupid to do it. But in dodgeball, I think it's such an important thing, and it makes the job for refs easier. And the thing is, the moment the refs can really concentrate on the stuff that really matters for them, then the game is so much better, and we don't have to take a timeout every 5 seconds to have a conversation from 6 people who didn't see shit, and then a stupid decision is made, which I completely understand. But I think it's on us as the player, as the team, as the coaching staff, as the organization, to help that. And then the sport gets so much more competitive and so much more fun for everyone involved. And if we like put out that message, I think that's a really inspiring message also to new players, because in the beginning it feels like you're taking something away from you, taking some competitive edge away, and you feel like, sort of, why should I go out if it just touched me in the slightest? Then maybe he doesn't deserve. If no one saw it, he doesn't deserve it. But that's not the way it works. So on that point, any opinions from your side?
Sure. I mean, so it's an interesting one. This whole situation for me has been quite alien because I've as we mentioned before, I played sport, I played rugby, football, whatever sport you can name. I've probably played it at some point or another. Um, and fair play is something that I've always adhered to. Respect the refs, all kind of that side of things. I've always wanted to do. I've never got a yellow card in football or a red card in rugby, and I think even in dodgeball, my whole 14 years worth of playing, the worst I think I've got is a blue card for rolling the ball back or spiking the ball or something like that. So it was a real sort of shock to the system really when I saw this, because um, I've racked my brains really for that particular moment. I'm trying to remember, did I feel anything, did I not? And I honestly, I still to this day, I'm not sure, to be honest with you. And it's one of those ones where, like, I kind of wish I'm like, did I feel something in that moment? And I should have done something more about it. And I've always kind of prided myself on being fair. So it was, in that respect, it's super embarrassing because I should know whether I was hit or not, and I still, well, obviously I was hit, like you can see, but I still don't know in my heart whether I felt it or not. So, um, and it's one of those ones where looking back at it, it's an obvious hit. You can obviously see what's going on, and it's like you said, it's embarrassing. So from my side of things, it has to be down to the player, and I'm not going to blame anyone. I'm going to blame myself here. I'm not going to say I feel like I was let down by anyone else, because realistically it should have come down to me whether I felt that or not. So yeah, no, I completely agree. I like the whole 3-step thing. That's really interesting. I think that's a good thing to instill in any dodgeballer who's upcoming or still playing to this day. I think that's a really good one. To be honest, we try to do that, like say in training and stuff. If we do see someone hit, me like, yeah, that did hit you. So off you go or whatever. So it's definitely something we should be doing. There is points where I'd love to go, like if you've got zero idea what happened there, if your head's on the ground and it bounced, you think you don't know, it hit you somewhere, but you're not sure, you're facing the ground. That's when you'd like to think that the refs are able to help you out in that situation. So that's what I would like to make sure that we still keep that going, because otherwise it becomes a little bit of a strange one where you're kind of disorientated looking up and no idea what's happened. So either having your teammates to help you there or the referees just to go, yeah, that's you. I think that's still important as well as the player being as honest as possible. But yeah, my side of things, it was a really weird situation for me to be in. I'm sure because I know we haven't spoken a huge amount, and probably not a lot of people from other nations have spoken to me. But anyone who knows me really well knows that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to get any kind of edge by cheating or anything else. Like that's just not. Well, like I say, I've been a sports person my whole life. It's not. I know that's not what we do. So, it's a very strange situation for me to be in personally. But in terms of the sport, it's probably quite important that happened. I know it's trying to look at the silver lining, because now hopefully people realise that's what could happen, and that should kind of get rid of that side of things really, and then we can kind of move forward and keep pushing the sport towards where we want it to get to. Rather than to argue about how to play it, So yeah, even though it's and to be honest, one of those things for me is it's a real thing that kind of takes you back really, because of the ban, and as you mentioned earlier, not playing is one of the hardest punishments. I love this sport, and will continue to play it for as long as I can, really. And the idea of not being able to jump on that court is really difficult. And to be honest, I think I'll still be there to support the guys anyway. So I can't stay away, unfortunately. But it's a real, and especially for everyone who's playing the sport, we all spend a lot of money to do it. We're drive. Well, I don't know how far away your trainings are and stuff, but we drive weekly. We drive hours and hours and hours and spend lots of money flying to other nations and things like that, just so we can play the sport we like. So if we can all play it properly together, and if there is a deterrent like what's happened to me, then all the better, really. As horrible as I'll find it, I think it's good that the sport can move forward, and hopefully be better for it, really. That's my take from it.
Yeah, awesome. I think that is an important takeaway and an important lesson, and honestly, again, I applaud you, and I think it's really awesome that you're willing to speak about it, because when I thought about the situation back then, honestly, it was 2023, at the Euros, and I was at that. I was at the game. I think our game just ended, our semifinal, and I was at the mixed game where you played against Scotland. And in that situation, I was right behind you, and I saw it hit your back. So like it touched your back and bounced off, and I saw that it went that way. And then the situation was really fucked up, and everyone was confused. And I was like, okay, this is so weird. And my instinct and my reaction as well was, what the fuck is wrong with you? And I was really blaming you in that situation and really thinking not really nice things about you. I was like, okay, and obviously, and it was a game changer. So that was a very deciding moment. It wasn't like it was just something, because in the past, one thing that was always very weird and really ugly for me was that England was really dominating and really winning against everyone, and there were still instances where they weren't playing fair, and that was something that was so uh I don't know, that was just absolutely gross to me. And that was, I think, something that really alienated them in a lot of ways. And when it got closer, then still the stigma was around, and there were lots of players who weren't the way that it was before. And I think looking back on it, I can see that it was like the system around, and also the way how the pressure works in that team, that it doesn't have anything to do with the other nations. It has more something to do with your competition against the next player who wants your spot, probably. So that was something that we also had in mind. And so seeing that situation back then, I was like, honestly, obviously, it's England, and obviously you're doing it this way. So there was a lot of judgment. And later on, another instance, I saw it as well from the stands against Northern Ireland, where I think it hit your hand. And I was like, I saw it
I
from
have,
the
yeah.
stands live, and I was like, this is weird. And we were watching on the stands, we were watching the video of it, and we're like, okay, we really just saw that. And that was like the situation. How do you go forward from this in a good way? And we definitely didn't at that point. And I think that's also a very important topic for the future as well. So there's one thing, which is cheating. Yeah, it's bad, but there's also a way where we are still humans and really are still should treat offenders in a human way, which where there is also a possibility to redeem yourself. And I think that whole the whole situation showcased the worst side of it, I would say. And obviously, you experienced it from that side as well. So just give your opinion on how it felt from your side with the whole situation afterwards, and how do you feel like the situation was handled from everyone involved, and what was your feelings in that situation, basically?
Sure. Really, really, again, as I mentioned, a bit strange to be honest. I mean, so both instances, because again, I've watched them back. I can see them just as plainly as everyone else can. Both instances, I didn't I didn't realise it happened until much later on. I mean, the Scotland example, I found out more or less instantly, to be honest. As soon as we came back up into the stands, I mean, I was absolutely buzzing after that game. I was like, God, yeah, we did it. It was such a close game, as I'm sure everyone saw as well. I was so buzzing. As soon as I finished that, I was like, yes, we did it. And then I sort of sat up in the stands. I was just getting some water on and whatever I was doing. And I think one of my teammates came up to me and showed me the video. And I literally put my head in my hands and I was like, for God's sake, what on earth is that? Like, this is the first time kind of seeing and or realizing what had happened. I kind of, I kind of expected it to kind of go a bit crazy because it was such a close game, such a pinnacle moment in that game as well. So I kind of expected it to get a little bit of blowback. So I was like, that's one of the things I was like, I'm so disappointed. It's an embarrassing thing for me. Like, I should have realised that I was hit in that particular moment. So, I should have reacted differently because of that. The Northern Irish one, I had no idea about until I kind of got back home. I mean, someone mentioned it towards the end, I think at the after party to me. And I was like, right, okay, I don't know what that was. And then I managed to see the video when I got back. And again, similar kind of reaction to it, and yeah, just disappointed in myself really that I didn't realise that's what happened at that moment. The backlash is it's interesting because in one point it feels horrible because it's the kind of community that I've been around for 14 years suddenly turn against you is a bit strange and a bit it's not very nice to be perfectly honest with you to be labelled as that, especially when I've taken so much pride in playing it for so long. So yeah, not very nice. But then as you've mentioned, I'm okay talking about it because it is something that it was inevitable. I think, to be honest with you, it's a real shame that I'm the person that ended up having happened to me, and having that situation happen. I really didn't, never wanted that to be the situation, but I think that it's good that it's kind of happened now. I do, I played Worlds and stuff, so I have played tournaments since, and didn't have any issues there as far as I know anyway, unless someone showed me another video that I didn't know what was happening. But
I'll have one
you
prepared
know,
here.
exactly. So, well, hopefully there's nothing like that. I really truly tried to make sure that I was very aware of my surroundings at every moment. But yeah, moving forward, obviously, like I won't be playing this Euros, which is one of the biggest things. Is it's the European kind of like lots of people, which is probably what I need to try and kind of get back into, because that'll probably be the hardest. I think the Worlds was a little bit sort of diluted because there was more nations there who maybe weren't aware of the situation and things like that. So it kind of made it a little bit easier for me, and probably for others as well, to not really address it and things like that. I think the European side, maybe when I'm in Ireland this summer with the guys, and hopefully I can address a few things. Anyone wants to talk about it, then obviously we can talk about it, and kind of move forward that way. Because, like I say, it's a real not very nice thing to go through. And if this is any deterrent for anyone else thinking about cheating or anything like that, then I'll happily talk you through like how it felt, because it's not nice. And that should hopefully stop anyone else from doing it. But yeah, strange one on my side. Really not something that I ever thought I'd be part of, really. But glad the sport can move forward because of it. I think that's the main point. And yeah, like I say, the dodgeball, because it's such a tight knit community, it's going to be tough to kind of get back into that. Hopefully, I can. I like everyone who competes. There's a reason we're all slight weirdos who play a slightly strange sport. So we should hopefully all be able to get on and move forward from it. So that's what I hope to in the future, anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I think I hope this might go a little way to help for that as well. And just on that note, for the future, do you think there were any situations or stuff that could be handled better in that case? Like we obviously have now in the the EDF, we have that system where you can put a protest in after the game when you thought someone cheated, and you put the video to the committee and they decide what to do with it, basically, which is not the case for WDF, which because at the World Championships there were instances that I saw not from England but from teams that weren't in the EDF, that came from somewhere else, and who did some blatant cheating against us, which was really weird, and it was so obvious that we were really shocked. But we decided to just confront them after the game and really talk to them and try to get our points across why we think it's a stupid thing. And luckily, it didn't change the result of the game, so it didn't hurt us in the end. But it was really so weird because at the European stage you're sort of used to really fair play, and you're used to newer nations that some players are not that fair, but it doesn't matter because they're not winning anyways. So it's really at the top level where it concerns you, and there are some players where you have a little bit of history, and sometimes you go like and maybe you watch the video later and zoom in and you see that you still can't figure it out whether it was a hit or not. So it's fine, but I think that has changed drastically to the better in the last few years. And from this World Championships, there wasn't an instance where I felt that someone cheated against us or against me, except for some teams before that, and we addressed that. So I think it really worked, whether it was that or just the community working on that. But as a system, you've been treated or handled by that system. Was there something that you would like to point out, or that we could do better in the future?
It's a good question. To be honest, it was a lengthy process. To be honest, that's probably the only thing that I would kind of um, like. Well, hopefully, I mean, now we kind of, as long as there's kind of sanctions where we know the situation, we can deal with it quicker. It was a long. I mean, I didn't hear anything for a long, long time, months, I think it was, before I heard anything. Sort of come from it. So we were kind of assuming there'd be something, but we didn't know. Eventually we kind of, I think I got an email. I'm trying to remember the whole situation now, but I think I got an email sort of talking about, would you like to provide your side of the story? which kind of a bit like what I've said to you so far, kind of sort of mentioned about the situation. I know obviously that those two instances that are obvious and something that I wish in the moment I could have changed. So I kind of mentioned that side of things. I gave my side of the story, and then eventually went to the disciplinary committee, and then a decision kind of came from that. So yeah, I was kind of told like what the situation could have been, like what the worst case scenario could have been, and I think they came to the decision that it was the worst case. I think that is the worst case, or maybe there's a longer ban or something. I can't remember the steps now. But no, they were pretty obvious and clear, to be honest. So it was just depending on how serious that they believed those two instances would have led to. So yeah, I kind of I kind of knew where I stood for most of it. I personally, I think I was a bit naive, thinking that it wouldn't be as drastic as it was. Um, because of the reasons that I sort of mentioned in my statement. But then I kind of understood why it would happen anyway. So I kind of get that, if that's what the level they think it is and that's what it deserves, then that's the decision that needs to be made. So that's absolutely fine, which is why I've accepted it now these days. And I think for players moving forward and stuff, I think that's probably fair. It is one of those situations where it's tough. If it's one that someone doesn't really realise that it's hit them, and it hasn't been noticed, and then it is noticed after, I do kind of, because that's the situation I kind of fall into. I do feel a little bit sorry for if that does happen in the future, if someone does get banned for something they genuinely don't know about. I get that that's going to be difficult to take, and it was difficult for me to take for a long time. But there has to be a deterrent there. I think ideally it's dealt with at the same tournament, or at least as close to when the incident happens as possible. That would be ideal, but I understand that's not always going to be possible. So yeah, I think it's as close to a good process as we can get at the moment. Until, for example, the sport grows a bit more and the officiators, we get more, or we get a bigger board on in terms of the disciplinary board and things like that, until we get more resource, until we get paid for it, or at least, then we can't expect it to move too far forward. So at the moment, yeah, I think it's a decent deterrent, and I think that, ideally we deal with it at the time. If it comes to it where a ref has to get involved, then we deal with it there and then. That would be ideal. But if it has to come after the tournament, after the game, whatever the situation might be, then it is what it is, and I fully accept it, to be honest with you. As horrible as I find it, I do accept it. And like you say, for people who are competing and stuff like that, it is a high level, it's a fast paced sport. And I think in order for it to move forward, it has to be kind of mainly player orientated. Otherwise, it's just going to be impossible for the referees to do their job and for the game to move forward. So yeah, I think, to be honest, the process, as horrible as the outcome is for me, is probably the right one. And
Okay,
correct.
that's good to hear, because yeah, it's a tough thing, and I think it's like the first case. It's the first time this has ever been done, so it obviously took very long and probably should be handled much faster. And yeah, it's probably not an easy thing for anyone, and I think the whole community had to learn from that situation how to handle that and how to treat it through the proper channels as well, and so that it's is in a respectful way. And I think the rule as it stands is really nice. I don't like the public shaming of or public shaming dodgeball player video clips where you see them cheating, because I don't know, there is the site that's called, I think, Dodgeball Cheats or something. I don't know if it's still around, but like if you watch them, and I don't know if yours is on there, maybe, but
I am, yeah.
okay, awesome. So so you're in the archives of Dodgeball Cheats. That is
Yeah.
some sort of an achievement. But the thing is, even if you watch a few of those videos, there are so many without any context. It's like there is so much context to the sport, as you said. And I think I like it's really hard to give you the benefit of the doubt in that situation that you didn't realize or feel it, because I cannot see, but obviously if I haven't felt it, I wouldn't know it. But I would say I feel my laces and the tip of my hair. If a ball touches it, I feel
Yeah.
it. Sometimes I don't feel whether it bounced before or whether it came from somewhere else. And if I put my head down and something hits me, I can't say did it bounce or where did it come from. So I need a ref for that. But I would say that that I 100% always feel stuff. And I think there are probably certain situations where adrenaline is high and it's really tight and stuff. But I've been in a lot of those situations, and I'd still say I feel it. At least that's for me. I've discussed it with other players who said they don't feel it. I think with time and those players in particular, it still turned out in the end that they did feel it. But I think it's also a protection mechanism, because obviously this is a really traumatic experience. You are in a really tough situation. You're in a really tight game. Something happens, lots of confusion. And I think also we're good at like convincing ourselves of stuff. So a lot of time has passed. A lot of emotions were set loose from every side, I would say. So I think it's absolutely fair enough if you say you didn't feel it. I believe you that you don't remember feeling it. I still think, and I would go away from those situations. Would you say you pretty much feel everything? So it's a weird question. So I don't want to like blame you that it's an excuse. I get like it's 2 years later or 1.5 years later, lots of stuff has happened, lots of emotions are around that, so we are good at making stories for ourselves as well. Not that I'm yeah, my English at this hour is not good enough to really conveniently communicate that, but I think you get my gist. So basically, would you say apart from that, what happened, do you personally or someone else, do you feel when a ball touches you? If it's the finger, if it's the hand, if it's a shoelace or something, is that something that we can take the responsibility of a player that he needs to feel that?
Yeah, I think so. To be honest with you, I mean, I personally generally feel if I get hit, and I'll go out for it. So, and I think that should be well. Again, it's hard to say for every single person, but I would
Yeah.
imagine it's pretty much the same for everyone. So, yeah, I think it is fair to say. I think it's difficult if we're talking clothing and stuff. If you're moving quickly and knee pads and stuff, for example, sometimes it's difficult, especially if you're moving like in a fast situation. I can understand instances where people can be confused whether it did hit them or not. So I can understand it, but in terms of like my situation, it is hitting body parts. So yeah, like I say, I'm, and it's the thing is, I've spoken to so many people about it, and I've said the same since the beginning. Like I really don't know, to be honest with you. I don't think I did feel it, and I would love to say that because generally, like I say, I've been playing for a long time, so generally, if I feel something, I'll go out for it, and if I'm not sure, I'll just check with the ref or check with whoever, and we're going to go from there. And so it's one of those situations where I think it's fair to ask the players to police it themselves really as much as physically possible, where they did believe there was a hit. And yeah, because you are right, you do feel it on the hair or wherever you do feel it hit, you do feel it. So I mean, in certain situations, for me personally, I think what I put it down to is adrenaline. I think that's the only thing I can put it down to at the moment. Is that particular moment I was so hyped and so it focused on trying to win and get into that game, and and all those kind of things that your emotions are going through. And it's I know in my heart that I don't I would have gone out if I realized, and I know that because I've played for such a long time, and that's just who I am really. And yeah, I mean, people can take it however they wish, to be perfectly honest with you, and which is
Obviously.
why I accept it, and which is why I haven't really spoken about this before. Like, I'd speak to people about it. I'm not talking to people, but to be honest, like if they've got their opinion on how that was with my particular situation, then absolutely fine. That's your opinion. I know how I felt about it. I do think it's absolutely fair to ask people to police it themselves, and yeah, I think we all do feel the ball hit us when it does. Um, But like I said, I do think there are certain situations where you're not sure.
Yeah,
Like the ball kind of came near you and you're not sure. So I think
definitely.
it does
I would
happen. But
completely,
mm,
yeah, I would completely agree. I think the moment the floor is involved, and like if it's close to the floor or close to the body, it's really hard. Once you're jumping, I think you should always feel it, because if it either it touched you or it didn't, and even if it hit your ball first or something, I think you can feel it. Sometimes it takes a second to register, where you're like, "Ooh, did that? Oh yeah, fuck, that just hit me. I don't know how, but it did." And that's also probably a learning process. But that's why I think the 3 steps or the 3 levels are really important, because maybe there are situations where adrenaline or confusion or whatever is so high that you don't feel it. Because I think in usual circumstances, the thing is on the player and you feel it. But giving you the benefit of the doubt in this situation, I believe you that you think that you didn't feel it, or that you somehow didn't realize that it hit you. I can completely like believe that, and I'm fine with that. But that's probably the situation where your team has to help you. And if we as dodgeball players say, okay, there is situations, or there are situations where you're not feeling it, maybe, then it's on your team to help you with that, because those situations will arise. And either we always ban people, and we ban them even though they didn't know they did anything wrong, which is something we have to do in the end, probably. But and maybe that is something that happens, and I'm completely fine with believing that in not everyone feels everything the same in every situation. So I think the second step of your team helping you in that situation is crucial, and even if it's just for you not getting banned in the future, so that they help you for something like that. And I think if we have those 2 steps down, and I think the third step, I don't know if the third step is the ref or the opposing team. I don't know honestly at this point which the third level is. I don't know, but maybe it was player, then players on the field, and then outbox or something like this. Something like this. But I think it's really important to keep the responsibility on the player, and then have a lot of responsibility on the team, on the out players, on the retrievers, everyone who is around and can see stuff. And if you are in the outbox and you think you saw something, then I don't want you to put your player out. I'm a lot of time as a coach in the outbox, and I don't watch the game really, and then I see someone in the angle of my eye, I see maybe a line fault, but I'm not sure about it. And then I'm not going to go like, step out. I think you stepped on the line. And I don't want any player to do that. I don't want any player to call a teammate out because you think he might have hit him. But if you're 100% sure that it did,
yeah,
and you saw a player didn't realize it and he stepped on the line and you saw it, and you know it's going to be on video afterwards, that's a thing that just happened. If you are 100% convinced, then it's on you. If you're
mm,
85% convinced, then I absolutely agree with you. Maybe don't do it and give, because if the player didn't do it and the ref didn't see it and you are just sort of saw it, then don't set him out. And maybe he's gonna get banned for that, and that's fair enough. That's on him. But really, in the spirit of helping your team, helping the sport, and helping everything, I think that's a really good way of looking at it, where you really also, because I think you've played in all of those matches, and I think there's a lot of respect to players when you hit someone and you didn't think you hit him. I think that's a moment where I really respect my opponent. That's the moment where I trust him completely in the game, where I'm like, fuck, I missed him. And he's like, no, you hit me. And I'm like, wow, okay, bravo, sir. I did not see it. No one saw it. I don't know where I hit you. And that's you now have my trust. And
mm,
other players don't have that initial trust where I'm like, maybe it was. And that's, I think, also something on everyone to keep it to yourself. And I always tell it to my players, but I know it's really hard. I'm not a really emotional player. So people who are more emotional, if they think they hit someone, then they really have the need to communicate that. And that is something that I don't like on a dodgeball place, because pointing, I think taunting, I think shit talking, I think competitive banter is great, and I would really like to see more of that in dodgeball. But I think we can't have it at the moment, because pointing at people and yelling at people is also a part of the game, and it's really tough to find like the middle ground. So at the moment, everything is banned, which I think is unfortunate, but I think it's the right decision at this moment. But I think if we can grow as a sport and get past that and really be like, if you point at someone, you're out. I would be really happy about that rule. If you point at someone and say you're out, then you're out, unless the other person asks for your opinion. And then I think it's really good. And I talked to players about that. If you have the trust from your opponent and you've played against him 10 times and you know he is fair and you are fair, and he tells you are out and you are not convinced, but you think you might be out, then I think it's up to you to take his point of view. And if the ref says you in, I'm completely fine with you staying in. But I think it's a good thing if you have that level of trust. But to have that, we really have to stop pointing at people and accusing people of cheating, because I think the accusation of cheating is much more prevalent at this point than cheating itself. And yeah, it makes just cheaters. If you get blamed for cheating 3 times, then the 4th time you're going to cheat, because why wouldn't you? You're getting blamed anyways. So I think that's my final rant to be: if you accuse someone of cheating, you're pretty much doing the same thing. And stop cheating, stop accusing people of cheating, help your team, help yourself, and we're gonna have a better future, I think. That was beautiful.
No, I like that. Completely agree. Completely agree.
Awesome. All right. Do you have anything else on that point you want to say, or are you fine to leave it at that?
Happy to leave it at that. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty open with all this stuff. So, if anyone wants to talk about anything, just let me know. But I'm pretty happy. Yeah, like I say, I mean, I want to get back into it. So hopefully I can see you guys at Euros when you're there, and then hope to see you again, and hopefully compete against you at Worlds, wherever that might be, the year ahead of that. So yeah, like I say, I'm pretty happy with that. I mean, obviously gutted not to be playing, but I'll be back soon, hopefully.
So the boombox will still be in Limerick.
Yeah, the boombox will still be there. I'll be
Will you
trying
have
to
a
compete with
proper
Max
one at
Close.
this point?
I might buy 3.
Yeah, a big one that suits your frame, basically, because this is much more embarrassing than the cheating, in my opinion. The boombox is just way too tiny. It has like no aura of authority. It's like, now, can respect it, but fair enough. So
It's the
I
biggest in
think,
the UK, but
okay, yeah, fair enough. It is the biggest in the UK. So on that point, biggest in the UK, something I wanted to ask you is, how fast do you throw? Do you know how fast you throw?
um, I, I haven't measured it in a long time, but back in
That's what they
three ball we
always
measured
say.
it in it. Yeah, back in three ball we managed to. I think it was about 68 miles per hour. We managed to clock, or I did, sorry.
Uh,
But that was with the slightly larger balls, so I'm not sure what it'll be these days.
And you have
What
never
I will,
met
I just
it. This is just bullshit, in my opinion. I can't believe anything you
yeah.
said before,
Basically,
because,
1 mile per hour faster than Brett. That's what I'll say is my answer.
okay, you just throw 1 mile per hour faster than Brad. I wouldn't believe that. Okay,
I don't
so
know.
I'm
It
gonna
must be
take.
close. I think Steve definitely wins, but yeah,
You think Steve throws harder than you?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, but that is such a dumb thing to never have measured that. I mean, I. Okay, I'm gonna bring my radar gun. So we do a little testing in training for our youth players, and obviously for ego, and also for a national squad. So I know how fast everyone potentially can throw, and I will measure you, because this is just ridiculous that you have never measured your throw. That is just ego 101. You have to do that.
How fast do you throw?
105 kilometers. I don't know what that is in
Oh,
miles, and it's been pretty steady at that rate. I think since for 7 or 8 years. I think I once hit 107. That was my fastest, but it doesn't get any faster. I'm getting older now, but I'm stronger. But it doesn't matter. I think I will try it again, because I wanna try to hit 107 once again. Not that it makes any difference. This is a pure ego thing, but it's really fun. And once the radar gun comes out, because it's really fun for youth players as well, because they really progress. They gain 10 miles per year, which is really fun, and it's also nice for them to compete a little. But it's still for the as soon as we put the radar gun out, every one of the boys is just throwing their shoulder out. So this is just ridiculous. This is maybe and because you're that professional, and but it's just, to me, it's completely unbelievable that you didn't measure it. So I think it's hearsay, and you know exactly how fast you throw, but you're embarrassed because it's 103 kilometers per hour. But probably your fake is faster than Steve's throw. So would you say you have the
Yeah.
best fake in the world?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think it's up there. I think it's definitely up
Yeah.
there.
Do you see any? Who would you like put up with you with on the faking
I think,
side of
well,
things?
Sam Richards from England is good. I don't know if you've
Yeah,
seen him.
that's true. Yeah, that's true.
Um, Otherwise, I'm not sure, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah.
No one has as much. I think because I'm quite large as well. I think it helps with the presence. So
Yeah,
yeah,
but the thing is, your
I think I'm
fake
definitely up
is
there.
really like 80% of the throw. You like your fake is 80%, and then which is really, I have big hands and I can fake quite hard, but I can't commit that far, and I don't want to. But it's playing against it. Like your fake is probably the most annoying fake I've ever faced, I would say.
Well, I appreciate
So
that. I do. I
no.
honestly do train it.
Yeah, no, it's really good. So it's probably the well. So just end this on a lighter note. So how would you characterize yourself as a dodgeball player? What like are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are you working on? So just that I get a profile once I face you in 2 years, when if I'm still playing then.
Yeah, weaknesses are definitely nice slow balls to my chest. I hate that. Guy's a nightmare.
Ah,
Um,
yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, and I've tried it because
no,
I knew it.
um, no. Well, I think my main strength is probably presence on court, sort of pressure that I can provide. Um, my standing counter probably one up there as well in terms of my strengths. Um, Throwing power has always been there, so it's one of my strengths that I like. I'm relatively agile for a bigger guy, which helps with my dodging and stuff. Still, obviously, my main weakness is probably my size. Um, so trying to get myself out of the way of some decent, especially 2 ball throws and 3 ball throws is really difficult.
Mm.
Something I constantly train on. My catching can be good. Um, as long as I set myself. But that's always something that, well, I'm sure we're all like that. With catching, it's so mentally based, mental. If you're catching well, you just seem to catch everything. Whereas, suddenly the next day it's the exact opposite. And you can't catch anything. So it's something that I'm always working on. But yeah, mainly, yeah, presence on court, I'd say is probably my biggest strength. Weakness, probably being my dodging and stuff like that, and just physical size on court. Unfortunately, I'm not quite the exact dodgeball ideal shape,
Yeah,
which
yeah, that's a question a few people asked me in the past. Like, what do you think is the perfect ratio? Because obviously your size gives you a lot of strength, a lot of presence, a lot of power, but also a lot of target area. So how would you like see is a good frame for a dodgeball, or do you think like the benefits of your size outweigh the weaknesses and can be accommodated for or something like that?
sure. I think, well, yeah, the power helps being the size you are. Just got longer levers. It's easier for you to get the power compared to anyone who hasn't quite got the same arm length and hand size and things like that. Makes a big difference especially with speed of throws. I think if you're a bigger guy and you're in dodgeball, it's just all about trying to get your mobility up there. Really, I work a lot on lateral moving and explosive dodging and things like that. Really working on the timing of dodging as well is what I really work on, because even if I dodge amazingly well, if I dodge too early, I'm still got a lot of me in a different
Yeah.
position. So it's still relatively easy to hit. So I work a lot on that. So figuring out people's throws when I'm playing against them, when they're likely to release, and then trying to get myself at sort of the latest point I move. Um, and that helps me personally being that size, and it'll probably help other people who are that size. But yeah, the ideal probably is someone probably a little bit smaller than I am, a bit more slight, who can still get a good amount of power, but is also agile enough to get out of the way. So yeah, I think someone just a little bit smaller than me would be perfect. But yeah, dodgeball's for all sizes, which is the great thing.
Yeah.
Um, and each size kind of comes with its own benefit, which is the cool thing.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely true. All right. So last question, like what is um like your kryptonite? What do you really hate in opponents? Or teams? What is something you really hate playing against?
I think for me is when I can't figure out someone's release. That's probably the hardest thing for me because, as I mentioned before, like it's hard for me to either get the block off because if I'm standing up tall, there's a lot of leg to hit. So if I can't figure out when someone's releasing, it's harder for me to block. And the same if I'm not on the ball. If someone's got a strange release, I really struggle. I don't know if you played the US, of course, in the final, but Payan, did you play against
Yeah.
Payan?
Yeah.
Yeah, his release I really struggled with. I mean, I was lucky not to get really targeted too much by him, but I couldn't work it out for the life of
Yeah.
me, and it was really, really hard. But that kind of player, I really, really hate playing against because I just can't figure it out until it's too late. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. Yeah, I love that because Pioneers, that's a really good example. I personally love playing against him, even though it's really, really tough. For me, it's also the release. If someone has a really fast throw, but also a really quick release, that's annoying because I try to look so much peripherally. So, and if I can't see it fast enough, then it really hinders my vision of the court. So with you, I know I have to be really fearful of the throwing power and of the fake. But the thing is, I know exactly when the throw is going to come. And I don't know if it's a fake or a throw, that I don't know. So I always have to react, which is annoying. But the thing is still, the timing is much easier for me. And if someone has a really fast release and I can't scan the whole field, that is something that really hinders my whole ability to play, really. So just thought it was an interesting question. But Payan, that's a really good example. I think a lot of people struggle with it, and not just on the wing, in the middle as well, because it's going to go cross to the left side, but it's just so his tell is so weird. Like he has no telegraph, I think, is in boxing or something. Like there's no tell from him that he's going to throw, and it's just all arm in one motion, and such a weird motion and such an effective targeted throw. Love that. Have to get that. So okay.
Yeah.
No, good. All right. Do you have anything else you want to get off your chest or want to get into, or is it late enough?
um, I think I'm okay, really. I mean, unless there's anything else you can think of, but um, yeah, no, it's been good to chat. It's been nice. I mean, we like I say, being from England and stuff, we don't always get to talk to people, and being who I am, I'm not always the person who makes the first kind of move and chats to people. So it's quite good to chat, and hopefully we can do a bit more when I see you in Ireland,
Absolutely.
and
You're gonna have
then in
time for
Worlds
it.
to
So
come up.
so I'm gonna
Yeah,
just roast
all I
your
can do is
boombox.
talk.
If you come with a little boombox, I'm just gonna roast you for the whole event. So you better be on your game. No, honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure. Really thankful. It just came to my mind a few weeks ago. I don't know why exactly, but I really wanted to talk to you, and I'm really happy that you were open to it. And I think it was a productive conversation as well. And yeah, it's nice to get to know you as well. And I think you have to change your approach because you have to make the first step. Otherwise, it's really tough, I think, for other people and other nations to approach you because you're from England and you don't have the most approachable frame and face, I would say. Okay, so
Yeah.
you look quite intimidating, and people have played against you. I think you have to get a bigger boombox and start the conversation from your side, and then you're gonna be golden.
Yeah, okay, I'll do both those things. That sounds like a plan.
Perfect. So then we learned one thing from this conversation. So Tamas, thank you so much for doing this. And to everyone else, keep throwing those balls. Try not to get caught and take care, everyone.